Deer Hunter Podcast, a platform created to entertain, educate, and evolve the modern day deer hunter. Shift gears, man. I got us up recording. Are you all good? What do you got, about 45 minutes? That work for you?
I got plenty of time. I'm about to pull up to the warehouse, and I'm going to start working on arrow orders while we're talking, so I'll have as much time as you need.
All right, cool.
Yep.
Well, let's get right into this. I thought it would probably be a good thing today. I bet you have a pretty good sample size now of what the most common inquiries are. I know you and Aaron are both fielding a ton of questions probably on a daily basis about, like, what do I need? Is this right? Is this wrong? Starting out, is there anything at the top of your head that's been, like, the most, or we can walk down a list of them? Like, where are people lacking the knowledge as far as building hunting arrows?
Well, of course, it depends on their I guess I wouldn't say skill level, but knowledge level, how long they've been doing it, like that. I mean, I've got a lot of guys that really don't even understand what the numbers are on the arrow. They don't understand what a 250, a 300, a 350, a 400. They don't know what that is. They don't know if it's the weight or what.
Sure.
So, a lot of them, we're having to start with explaining them, what the spine is and how it works, and that's what that number represents, is the, amount of flex, basically, for lack of a better term, that arrow has. So a lot of guys, we have to start with that, and then after that, the guys that already do know that, they're unsure because most of the time their bow is right on the line between a certain size, and that's where they struggle, is picking out the right size arrow. So that's the main thing. What size do I need? And that's what we help guys with. And here's the thing, like, for any of the people that are listening that want to call and ask either of us, or text or call or email or whatever, if they want to ask, what size they need, we get a lot of information from guys that we don't need. The only thing that we need to know is what kind of bow it is, the draw weight, the draw length, and if you have a certain point weight, what that point weight is.
Mm-hmm.
After that, there's really not anything else we need to know. We don't need to know what your old arrows are. We don't need to know how long it is. Those things don't figure into the equation because we don't determine the length of the arrow by what you've been shooting. Hey, I'm gonna change my phone over here real quick.
Go ahead.
You there?
Yep.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
So we don't determine the arrow by what you've previously been shooting. The length of the arrow is determined by what we feel it needs to be to be spined out properly, because the length is the easiest way to adjust the spine.
Right. On the spine, it just comes down to material build, right? Thicker walls, more material. That's what gives the arrow its rigidity, correct? And in tandem with that, as you go down or up that spine chart, the stiffer the spine, the heavier the arrow per inch, correct?
That's correct. Just because you're using more material.
Right.
So that's how you get your spine, and it's really simple. I mean, it's just a weaker or a stiffer rod. That's all you're doing. It's not rocket science by any means, but the spine is, to me, the proper spine is 5 times more important than the straightness of an arrow. I would rather shoot an arrow that is as bad as 9,000 straightness, but is perfectly consistent in spine. Now, for most people, you're not going to be able to tell them that because, 99 guys out of 100 don't have a way to check the spine on an arrow and the spine consistency.
Right.
But for $20-$30, everybody can buy an arrow spinner.
Yep.
So everybody's going to check the straightness of an arrow. That's why you have to have them, super, super straight, because that's what people are checking. And of course, it doesn't hurt to have them perfect, but there's none of us out there except for a handful of elite world-class shooters that could ever tell the difference between a 1,000 straightness arrow and a 6,000 straightness arrow.
I'll say that $50 will set you apart from the pack if you get a small scale that does grains and you get an arrow spinner. You are in another classification of bow hunters. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would.
And
There's no doubt about it.
Readily available at basically any archery site. And now you can weigh your points for consistency, weigh your arrows for consistency, and you can actually spin your arrows and physically see what they look like and how they're going to fly.
That's right. Don't get too crazy caught up in the straightness. If you can get a good spin on an arrow spinner and visually see that it's spinning well, that's as good as you really need to obsess about and just move on. The whole concept behind buying an expensive arrow is spine consistency. If you're buying a 300 spine arrow, you want all of those arrows to be within, 290 to 310. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And that's hard to get. The other thing is that cheaper arrows, the way they're built, they're going to have like a stiff side and a weak side. And so you may have arrows that are consistently spine, but one side of them may be 300, but the other side may be, 270, because there's more material on that one side. So it's stiffer. So that's why you have to not rotate arrows. Just keep turning the knock until you get one that doesn't group. Start grouping with the others. It's because it's got a spine on it and one side's stiffer than the other. And that way, you're going to want to have that spine aligned all the same.
Right.
And so that's just a few of the simple things that we have to explain to people. They just don't understand that concept,
You have I believe you went ahead and put an index chart on your website, correct? So people can go on there and get a general idea. I know those charts exist all over, but some of them are pretty far from what I've found to be accurate. But I thought I saw you guys put something up on your site as well, didn't you?
Yeah, we have a spine chart, and it's pretty close for the most part. It's the details that people will give us that'll help us fine tune that.
Right.
Mainly point weight.
Right.
That's really the thing. The other thing too is that if a guy is right on the line, let's say between a 350 and a 300, either one is going to work. You can make either one of those work with just slight arrow length adjustment. Okay. And that's one of the things that guys struggle to understand is that, let's say that you're looking at your draw length on the chart and your weight, and it says, okay, 60 to 65 pounds, you could either shoot a 350 at your draw length, or you're right on the line at a 300. Well, if you want to shoot a lighter, faster arrow, you're going to want to cut that 350 as short as you can get it, because that's going to stiffen it up. And then the other side of it is you can make adversely, you can make the 300 a little longer, and it'll weaken it a little bit, and it'll kind of blend and do the same performance. The other thing is if you're looking at a chart, and let's just say it says 61 to 65 pounds, and you're shooting 61, and you're right on the line, you can go down one. If you're shooting 65 and you're right on the line, you can go up. It all depends on what people want. And then there's also other tricks, like, adding a wrap to the back of an arrow helps stiffen it. So when you put weight in the back, it'll help stiffen the spine a little. So if you're right on the line, but you want to shoot a little lighter arrow, you can add a wrap and it'll get the spine right. So, the thing that I want everybody to know is that the single most important thing is getting the proper spine for your bow, and then making sure you have an arrow that is consistently spined. That is where your accuracy is going to come from, if you can shoot that well. And that's the big if you can shoot that well. Most of us can.
Right. Well, there's two different things, right? And we should probably separate them. The guys that are listening that are building arrows to hunt with recurves and longbows, and then guys are, shooting compounds. And I heard you and Aaron touch on something, and it was, just something that I caught and took note of, is that with a modern compound bow, a release, a drop away rest, you have a lot of forgiving factors to where you almost couldn't be overspined. But when it comes to traditional bow hunting, most bows require some paradox to come off your limb for that thing to fly right. They're kind of, they're in the same category, but I made the statement last week that building arrows for me now with my traditional bow seems to be a little more critical. I can monkey some stuff up with my compound, and it doesn't seem to have as big of an impact as what it does with my stick bow.
That's correct. With a stick bow, all of your flaws are being magnified. That's just the way it is. There's no way to have a perfectly consistent release. You're shooting off your shelf, so you're going to have different impact, different impact and contact points as that arrow's going off the shelf every time. There's just a lot of room for error, so it's very difficult to get a repeatable, consistent result when you're trying to tune. So I tell a lot of guys, and I know Aaron does too, don't get too crazy caught up in the beginning with the setup. Focus more on your form, your release, your mechanics, and get that done right first. Because without that, you don't have any way to determine what you even need, or how to even get started getting the proper arrow and the proper spine.
Right.
If you can't shoot the same hole through paper 3 times in a row, you're beating your head against the wall. If you can't shoot a recognizable, decent group at 20, you can't do any plane tuning.
Right.
You can't do any of that. So just work on being able to shoot first, and then worry about all the crazy details later.
Yeah, and it's going to take some time, right? I know there's like a renaissance of traditional bow hunting right now, which is cool and unique, but it's a patience game, and it takes a long time. I've been doing it for 25 years now, and I still don't have it figured out. So to think that you're going to pick it up and in just a couple months be to the point where, you know, you're paper tuning arrows, and I mean, some people are just naturals, right? Some people it's going to take a little bit longer, but yeah, you're completely accurate in that statement. You'll have a road ahead of you before you kind of get to this point, but when you do, it's imperative stuff. If you're going to be dialed in at the highest level, you got to have it all right.
Well, the key to penetration with a trad bow is arrow flight. I mean, that is it in a nutshell. You can argue, FOC, arrow weight, what broadhead. You can argue that shit all day, but if that arrow's not flying perfect, it doesn't matter what you got. You're not going to get penetration.
Right.
You know, I hate to burst all these guys' bubbles that spend their life on the internet arguing about percentages of FOC. I mean, if you can't shoot for shit and get good arrow flight, it's not really going to matter.
Sure.
So, and the majority of the poor flight on a trad bow comes from the shooter, not the arrow, not
Right.
the bow.
Right.
It's just very difficult to get those things to fly well. So, with regards to picking the proper spine for a trad bow, that is not a one size fits all. I have so many guys that say, "Hey, why don't you have an arrow spine chart on your website for trad guys?" That's not, I don't understand why you don't have that. That's not fair, that we don't have one. And I said, well, that arrow spine chart for trad bows is in my head. And the only reason that's the way the only way it can work is because if you call me and tell me that you're shooting a longbow that is 50 pounds at 28 inches, I can't give you an arrow recommendation based on that. Even if you told me I'm going to shoot a 200 grain head, okay, I still can't do that, because what I've got to know is is that bow cut past center? Is it cut to center? I've also got to know, is it a old, wooden D-style longbow, or is it a, higher tech laminate reflex deflex longbow? Because there's a big difference on what kind of power stroke or energy that those different bows are going to generate. It's not a one size fits all. I may tell somebody, shoot, man, with that old, D-style Howard Hill style bow, you're not generating the same amount of energy that you would with, say, like one of my Bushman reflex deflex, carbon and bamboo, hybrid bows. I mean, those bows shoot as fast as any recurve I've got. So, and they generate a lot of energy, to where the other bow, it's not even, it's 30% less. So that's why there's no way to have just a trad chart. It's just, there's too many variables. So, but that's why we're here, to answer questions,
Well, and to add to that, what you said, so the bow's 50 at 28. I don't know. Are you drawing 27? Are you drawing 29? Are you drawing 30? Because you're adding and subtracting poundage with every, quarter inch of draw weight on those bows. I don't know if there's math for every bow is probably different, but it's a per inch can be more than a few pounds per inch, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was just kind of using the example of some guy with a 28-inch
Right.
draw.
Right.
But that is 100% correct. And some of those bows, like, I don't know every bow. I don't know the draw curve and the I don't know the draw curve cycle on all these different bows. A lot of them I know, and a lot of them I can average and kind of know what they're going to be. But some of them I don't know, and some of these bows stack like hell once you get up over 28 inches. So they may draw, 2 to 2.5 pounds per inch as you're drawing, but when they get to 28 and then go to 29, they may jump up to 3.5.
Right.
Is that your? Can you hear that noise?
Yeah, it's somebody's trying to contact me. I just shut them down.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Yeah.
I didn't know what the noise was. I wanted to make sure I wasn't messing.
Last time I tried to put my phone in a mode where that couldn't happen, I hung up on you. So.
Oh.
I'll deal with it for the time being.
No, it's all good.
There should be
I just
gone
wanted to make
now.
sure it wasn't me.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, for trad guys, it's really going to be you're going to have to call us and you're going to have to talk to us, and
just way too many variables.
Way too many. But that's all right. It's all good. I love talking to guys about it,
Right.
So I don't want this to come across the wrong way, but for guys that are going to call in, I get I don't know, 100 plus calls a day. So I can't listen to every hunting story that from the past season. I can't do that. I've got other people calling and other people I've got to talk to. So it's difficult, for me sometimes, because I have to, kind of cut people off and say, man, I've got to hop off here. And that's the worst part. I wish I could do that, but I just can't,
You'd be on the phone all day, every day.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I wouldn't mind doing it. I just got other people, they're going to be mad at me.
Right.
Because they can't get a hold of me.
Well, I think what you're getting at is you can greatly respect and appreciate, I mean, when people call you, that they kind of have a general idea of what you need to know so that you can get them set up in an efficient manner. Because sometimes that first phone call's not the last one. There could be some phone calls to follow and get dialed in. And, yeah, it's just about being efficient. And everybody's time nowadays, pace of life, man, it's pretty valuable. 5 minutes is 5 minutes that you can't get back. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And it's funny to me, just because I've had a lot of conversations lately and a lot of inquiries about arrows, that guys start the conversation off, and it seems like it's like completely in the wrong direction when they say, I want to shoot 300 grains up front, and I want to shoot this broadhead, and I'm always just curious, like, why? What got you to that point? Why? What made that? How do you know that that's what's right? It's almost as if they have these preconceived notions that aren't based on anything that is accurate as far as what their bow actually needs to be set up correctly.
Yeah. But you know what? That's okay though. That's okay. I have to cut some guys off, quickly sometimes, because they start talking about what they've been shooting, and I just have to kind of say, hey guys, I'm not really concerned about that. Tell me your bow specs, and tell me, if you have a bunch of heads that you want to shoot, because point weight's a big factor. And I'm gonna tell you exactly what you need. I don't really care about what you had, because whether it was right or wrong, it's irrelevant on what I'm gonna recommend to you.
Right.
So, but it's fun though, man. I love talking to guys and helping them, and I love the feedback once they get them and they go, man, how in the world have I been shooting, this spine arrow and this setup the last 3 years and been so wrong? It's they're like, I just can't believe the difference. and it's the difference in their groups and their accuracy and all of that. And of course, once you get in the field, the hunting performance, I mean, you don't get as many of those feedbacks because it's hard to be successful with a bow. So, but the feedback we get from guys when they're shooting just goes through the roof, and their groups start tightening up, and and I'm just going, guys, it's not that we're selling some magic bean here. It's just that you didn't have the properly sized arrow before, and you were getting terrible arrow flight, and there was no way that they could ever group, no matter how good you could shoot.
Right.
So it's just getting people what they need.
And
then slowing the arrow down with a little heavier arrow. That's where accuracy comes from for the average guy.
Yeah.
And that's who that's who the lion's share of our customers are, is the average guy. There's only those few 1% elite shooters out there,
Mm-hmm.
and those guys can push the limits and shoot super high speeds. But for me and everybody else, the normal humans, if you slow it down a little bit, it's a lot easier to be way more accurate.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I guess just from the sales aspect of the industry, or listening to what people want, it's been faster bows, max it out. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
it seems counterintuitive a lot of times when you say slow it down. People just, man, they have a hard time turning that bow down. You know what I mean? But I don't know if you remember when I called you this winter and I got that new prime and I was having a little bit of issues tuning it. Man, I backed that thing down about 6 pounds and it just started bullet holes. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
that's all it took. It just took finding that sweet spot and turning it down just a couple pounds, and now I got a little easier draw weight on the shoulder. Everything's working perfectly. But I think a lot of times guys get bows, and there's no way in hell that Allen key is going in there, and that thing is not going to be buried into that limb pocket. It is like not an option in their head,
Yeah, well, my thing is let's say you spend $150, $200 on a set of arrows, and you get it all set up, and you start shooting, and you're getting a poor flight, bad groups, whatever, and you start testing, and you realize that you're a little stiff spined. So you're like, crap, I got to go buy new heads. I got to go get new arrows. I got to do all this expensive crap, to get this thing shooting right. Really, all you got to do, it's just, so easy, is just take the damn Allen wrench and turn your bow down a little bit, lower the weight, and bring the bow to the spine you got. There's no reason to go spend a bunch of money if you don't have to. My goodness, you could drop it 3 pounds and it could be shooting like a laser beam. And vice versa. You could raise it if you're, too stiff, and if you're too weak, you can lower it and just bring it right into your arrow. So, anyway, there's very simple solutions other than spending a bunch of money. I promise you that.
When I started in the last, I don't know, 5-6 years, really diving into traditional bow hunting, spending more time doing so, it really kind of helped set my mindset to where when I do pick up a compound, that it's like, I can dial this thing down 10 pounds and I'm still shooting 80 or 100 feet per second faster than my recurve. You don't need a 70-pound bow to go hunt whitetails from a tree that you're going to be shooting 15 to 30 yards. It's a 50-pound bow with the right arrow is a 50-pound bow with a quiet 50-pound bow that is just dialed in is as lethal of a killing machine that has ever existed in the age of archery hunting, in my opinion.
Oh, I agree 100%. When I was younger, I shot a lot of poundage in a real heavy arrow. And I'm talking about 25 years ago. But I did that because, I was hunting back then. I was hunting moose every year. I was spending, 30 days a year hunting elk. Um, and I had bows that at 80, 85 pounds, with a 500 grain arrow, they were only shooting 230, 235 at 80 something pounds. So, I needed all that weight, to generate enough speed to make the momentum equation work, because speed is a factor for any projectile. But now with these new bows, man, I mean, I can accomplish the exact same thing with 65 pounds now,
Mm-hmm.
So guess what? I shoot a 65-pound bow. I could shoot a heavier bow, but there's no reason to do it. I know the threshold of momentum I'm trying to, achieve. And that's what I do. So you don't have to shoot a bunch of weight anymore with a nice compound.
No. Yeah, it's been kind of a full circle learning curve for me, because for a long time, I'd get these newer compounds and they shoot real fast, and I'm going back 10 years now, or 15 years, when when the speeds really started to increase on the bows, where they went from like the wheel and cables to getting into past parallel limbs, and the speeds really started picking up. And it's funny, as the bows kind of got nicer and faster, I got less accurate. And I always was like, man, I remember just having like a simple bare compound and some Easton aluminums, and at 20 yards being able to shoot 12 arrows and not have one that the fletchings aren't touching the other ones. And
That's
then,
right, because going slower, and it was a heavy arrow.
yeah, and then I get, these faster bows and carbon arrows and stuff, and it's, 20 yards, and I'm everything's in a pie plate, or a little bit closer, but it's not like what it was when I had it just super simple. And it always just kind of baffled me. It's like, well, I'm spending more money, I'm getting nicer stuff, why aren't I getting better results? Well, I just wasn't educated enough to really know what I'm doing. And the education is just such a critical part of it. You can have all the nicest gear, you can spend all the money, but yeah, if you don't get the education and you don't make a couple small moves and minor details, you're just setting yourself up for some frustration.
Oh, there's no doubt. I heard Tim Gillingham on Aaron's podcast this week, and Tim's probably one of the greatest shooters. Well, I'd say one of the greatest shooters alive, but he's probably one of the greatest shooters of all time. And I don't know him at all. Never met him. I've just seen him shoot. I mean, the guy is amazing with what he can do and his technical abilities with a bow and arrow. But he's got a 33-inch draw, and he shoots high poundage. And he spent a lot of time on Aaron's podcast this week talking about how speed is so important, and he wouldn't recommend that anyone shoot under 280, 290. They really need to be up over 300. And that's great advice for a guy that has a 33-inch draw, and probably one of the best technical shooting skill sets ever. That's great for him. He is a death machine, just because of his wingspan and his abilities. But for us normal humans that draw 28 inches, for us to achieve 280, 300 feet per second, we're going to have to pull a lot of weight compared to him. Probably 15 pounds difference to achieve the same speed, if not more, with the same, let's say the same weight arrow. Okay. So it's, you hear me say a lot that it's not a one size fits all thing. That is especially true with regards to compound shooter to compound shooter based on their specs and their wingspan. You can't compare yourself to that. And so to tell a guy that he needs to try to achieve those speeds, you know, to get that flatter trajectory, well, yeah, it would be great to have that flatter trajectory. I mean, it would be wonderful to not have to worry as much about being off on your yardage a little, you know, when judging yardage to shoot an animal. You definitely have a larger window and a larger margin for error. But in the real world, we just don't have that luxury. You know, if you're an average draw guy, it's just the way the cards have been dealt. You don't have that ability to, you know, to shoot at those speeds and that trajectory with a short draw. So you've got to slow it down. You're going to have to understand how to judge yardage a little better and make adjustments on the fly. You're just not going to have the same trajectory that these guys do with these incredible, you know, draw links. So it's really bad information because it's just not going to work.
It's not applicable for 99% of youths and females either, right? I mean, to shoot 300 feet per second, unless they're switching over.
I'm just talking about an average guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, the youth and female thing, Tim is in total agreement, you know, with my philosophies there.
I got you. I didn't listen.
Yeah.
I saw that podcast up. I just didn't have an opportunity to listen to it yet, and I'll be sure I will here in the next couple days. But
well, it's a great podcast. There's a lot of great information there. There's a lot of bad information there for normal humans.
Right.
Yeah. So, hey, I've got some wet epoxy here. I need to cut 5 arrows. Can you give me 2 seconds?
Go for it.
All right.
Guys working while we're doing this. Wonder if anybody's ever ran an arrow saw and cut arrows on a podcast.
My bad. Sorry about that.
No, man. I was just wondering in my head if anybody's ever ran an arrow saw and recorded it and put it on a podcast. It's great. Maybe I'll go back and edit that out. Maybe I won't.
Oh, that's all my bad, man. I just...
Dude, no, I don't care at all. We keep it real here. You know what I mean?
That's right.
You're working. I'm working.
Yeah, so all good.
Yeah, man, I'm on this journey too. You know, I proclaim, you know, not in any manner to be an expert or even at a graduate level in any of this. I just started learning the last couple of years, and you know, I'm acquiring as much information as possible so that, you know, 5-10 years down the road, I can say with confidence, yes, I do understand this at a high level, and I'm confident telling you. I don't want to say what's right or what's wrong, but I mean, that's kind of what I want to be at, is to where confident factor, where I know what's right and I know what's wrong, and everybody else can get there too. That's just the luxury of recording and sharing these conversations nowadays, is you get to expedite the learning curve, you know.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah, well, you know, man, the problem is that a lot of guys get a lot of their information from podcasts, but they don't have the backstory to be able to basically interpret the information they're consuming.
Yes.
They would never be able to listen to that podcast with Tim and know, oh, that's great info, but it doesn't apply to me.
Right. Certainly.
Based on my draw length, whatever. So I would just tell guys, man, it is so important to basically set your bow up within your abilities. And I do the same thing. I set mine up I try to get around 265 feet per second. Not that that's a magic a speed, but it is a speed and a trajectory that I've been shooting out of a compound for 15 years. So I understand that flight. I know the trajectory of a 520 grain arrow going 265. So when I've got a deer that let's say that deer, I draw on him at 30, and I'm set up to, shoot him at 30. I draw on him, and he spooks, or he catches a glimpse, but he doesn't totally run off, and he bounds 3 bounds, and now he's at 37. Well, if you've shot that same weight, same speed forever, you know what your trajectory is. You know what the drop is. You know what the delta is that you can say, okay, I know he's over 35. I'm pretty sure he's under 40. I know that I've got, say a 7-inch drop from this point to this point. So all really I've got to do is hold high lung. If I hold high lung, worst case scenario is I hit him mid lung. Best case scenario is I hit him heart, and then if he still drops, you're still in the vital zone. That's a really fast calculation that's got to happen within a second. But if you don't know what the trajectory of your arrow is, it's impossible for you to be that efficient in the field. And the difference between guys that are really successful and guys that are rarely successful is capitalizing on opportunities. You always hear the stories of the one that got away, and it's normally they weren't able to capitalize on a variable. Something happened and they couldn't make an adjustment that fast. And that's the difference. And now shooting a trad bow, that's helped that. You get a little bit more instinctual. You understand arc and arrow flight and all that. You know how to hold high, hold low, because you're not really basing it off a finite pin and pin gap. But all those same rules apply to a compound. So when I set up my bows for whitetails, I have one pin or one crosshair. It's an adjustable sight, but I never adjust it. So you should text this guy and tell him stop calling you.
No kidding. I don't hear it on my end when.
Oh, okay.
It's your fault.
Yeah.
It's Ben Saffron. He bought a bow from you, and he's asking me some bow and arrow questions. He shoots at the place that I shoot here locally.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He's
blowing
me up.
You mean text him and tell him to stop calling you?
Yeah.
But anyway, I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
Bows and arrows.
Oh.
Yeah, right.
Oh yeah, one sight, one pin.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So I set my bow up with one pin for whitetails, and when I get up in the tree, based on my terrain, my areas that I can shoot, I'll adjust it. I'll either have it, dead on it at 20, to where I know to hold a shade low inside of 15, and I hold a shade high, out to 30, and I just kind of raise it as I go. And then if it's an area that I can shoot to 40, which 40 is my max on a whitetail, regardless of how good I can shoot. There's too much movement on a whitetail after 40 to me to take an ethical shot at them.
Unless it's bedded
So
or something, right?
yeah, yeah. So what I do then is I just simply move my sight to where I'm dead on at 25. I know how low to hold inside of 25, and then out to 40, I know how high to hold. I never touch my sight. I never ever adjust it unless it's just a total layup to where the deer is feeding. He's 37 yards. I'll dial it and I'll shoot. But I keep my setup ready to basically almost trad shooting. If a deer comes through chasing a doe, I know that tree's 30. He's inside of it. He's outside of it. I know how to kill him without making any adjustments. And within the second you hear him grunt or second you see a doe blow through, you're already drawing. There's no adjustment. He stops for that 1 second. There's no adjustments, calculation, anything. You know where to hold and you kill him.
Right.
And that's the difference in being consistently successful, is being able to capitalize on those opportunities, because Mother Nature doesn't hand you a layup every time you go into the woods.
Well, it's part of the reason why I wanted to have this conversation here now. As we record this, it's the end of March. It's springtime. I know a lot of guys, myself included in the past, don't really start thinking about, their bow and their arrows and their broadheads until, August. Start getting the itch. And really, I mean, if you really want to do the stuff at a high level, it could take some time and some work, and you might have to change this and that. I mean, you could tinker all summer and then go into the fall and be really, really confident. So I wanted to have this conversation now for guys that are thinking, man, I want to know this stuff at a higher level than what most people do and be able to apply it. And
Sure.
now's the time of year where, you should be monkeying with this stuff, getting new arrows, trying everything out, because there's some time and a learning curve involved.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think we should maybe not dive into the weeds of super technical stuff here. I would say if you really want to help guys, let's talk about a simple, fail-safe setup just for consistently killing animals. Number one, practice at 50 and 60 yards. I am not saying don't shoot that far. I'm saying practice at 50 to 60 yards while you're practicing. When you get into the field to hunt, especially whitetails, know what your distance is, know what your effective range is. I would tell guys that I've killed probably somewhere between 400 and 500 whitetails with a bow. A blend of trad and compound, probably half and half.
That's crazy.
Huh?
That's a crazy number.
Well, I mean, you know where I live, though. I mean, it's...
Yeah, I get
Yeah.
it, but still, yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, so... But what I would say is that let's just use an even number, and let's just say it's 500. I would tell you that 400 and I have no idea what that number is. I'm just doing a conservative guess, okay? But let's just say that, to put it in perspective, let's say that it's 500 whitetails. 490 of them have been within 30 yards. I've killed maybe 10 whitetails between 30 and 40 yards. I've never killed a whitetail or taken a shot at a whitetail over 40. It is not in my game plan. And I know that sounds crazy to a lot of guys, but I'm making a point that you can be extremely successful without doing that. You're talking about 95% of those animals that I've shot, of the whitetails I've shot, have been within 30 yards. So to further that, there's not been very many that have gotten away. And so you're limiting your exposure to failure. You're limiting your variables because you're keeping everything close. And that's what bow hunting is supposed to be. These guys are having a lot of trouble. The guys that I talk to that are having a lot of trouble, they're basically wrestling outside their weight class. They're taking 40 and 50-yard shots at whitetails when it's just there's too many variables there to be successful, even if you're a great shooter. So if they would just keep it close, they'd be in good shape. Now, how do you set up a bow to be super effective very quickly on a whitetail, in a close range? Well, you make sure that bow is extremely quiet. One of the ways to do that, of course, is by having a heavier arrow because it absorbs the energy to the arrow, not into the bow. So have a super quiet bow, keep it really simple, and set yourself up to where you can learn that trajectory 0 to 30 like you've got it memorized. And that way you can basically set one pin at 20 and there's no confusion. There's no guesswork. Your brain is not trying to calculate which pin to use. Do I gap it? Do I shoot between this pin, that pin? Take your brain completely out of the equation. So when you're ready to close the deal on an animal, it's basically a hold high, hold low, one pin setup. That way, when that thing comes through there, the only thing you're focusing on is picking a spot wherever you're going to hold that pin on that animal and squeezing through your shot. You're taking as much of your brain work out of the equation, and that's how you kill not only whitetails, but everything. Mm-hmm. It's got to be this natural, instinctive process that doesn't take a lot of calculations to execute.
Yeah, as you're saying that, I'm just thinking in my head about my own personal experiences, and I've killed roughly like 40 deer, and I think I've shot one deer at just over 40 yards. I don't think I ever took another shot at a deer. I killed that deer. I don't think I ever took a shot over 40 yards at another one. And I think maybe a product of that is just where I hunt. You can't really hunt field edges here in Michigan because of pressure. The deer just don't really frequent those areas until after dark.
Yeah.
But I mean, out west, 40 yards is extremely common for a western hunter to have to be proficient at, and I would assume too in some agricultural areas where guys are hunting deer in bean fields and things of that nature, that you could reach out and touch some stuff too. But I've only ever killed one deer over 40, and it was basically right at 40, and I don't think I've ever shot at another one over that distance.
Yeah, so you can set your bow up to be moderately with a moderate speed. You don't have to have some crazy heavy arrow, but have a little mass, and then worry about good flight, in that zone. And that 50 and 60 yard practice that you do, that's where you're fine tuning your flight. That's where you're fine tuning your setup and making sure everything's perfect. So then when you come back into that 40 and in range, it's just pure death. I mean, it is just automatic, tight groups. You're hitting where you aim. It's just a simple solution. And I mean, that's the way I set up every kid bow,
Right.
One pin, it's dead on at 15. It's a little low at 20. And for little guys, they just don't shoot over 20. And it's not that they couldn't, but you're wanting to make sure that they have success. You don't want them to have a deer get away and then go, oh my gosh, I'm never doing this again. And then the same thing with females. I would, if they're just an average, female hunter that'll shoot a little bit before the season to go hunt with their husband, they're not just like a crazy, really into it archer. Mm-hmm. It's 30 and in, man. It's adjusting your effective range to your skill set. And man, I'd rather get that message across and talk about techie arrows and all that crap, because that's the most important thing, is people understanding you. While you do listen to the greats like Aaron Snyder and Tim Gillingham make these incredible long distance shots, it's not in the cards for you. It's not in the cards for me, you know?
Yeah, and maybe it shouldn't even be something. And Aaron's been pretty cool about, sharing his whole adventure with the stick bow. I mean, maybe it isn't what you should even aspire to want to accomplish, more so than being able to get within 8 yards of something and hearing it breathe when you put an arrow through it.
Yeah, well, you know what? That is, to me, that is it's a personal choice. And we've had this conversation before. I'm never going to impose my will or my opinions on someone else. If guys think that it's in their mind, if they're comfortable and they feel that it's ethical to take long shots,
sure,
that's their prerogative. It's their decision to do. I'm not going to judge them for it. It's just not what I'm going to choose to do. I've taken some long shots in the last 2 years, as I've started hunting with Aaron more, and I've taken them on animals that once I realize that they're not a whitetail, they're not going to make those sudden movements, or the conditions are right. I've taken some 60-yard shots in the last 2 years, and believe it or not, they've both worked. But it's on animals that are not tuned up like a whitetail. The Western animals are different. They're not as jacked up as the whitetails are, for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's just genetic predation. I mean, from day one, whitetails are they're typically they cohabitate with humans, and we're always trying to kill them and eat them because they're delicious. So they got to figure that stuff out. I mean, from basically a 6-month-old deer,
That's right. Yeah, it's growing up in a war zone, man.
Right. Yeah, that's why I love chasing them and hunting them, and I think that's why they're probably I'll hear a lot of guys that travel around the world and hunt everything, and then I'm always surprised to hear when somebody asks them, like, if you could only hunt one thing, what would it be? And the answer, more often than not, a lot of times guys say whitetail. Like, they're just, God, they're such a challenge, and they're so tuned in. They're a hard critter to kill.
They are. I love it. I don't know that I could ever get enough. It's funny. I'll tell you a funny story. The first time that Aaron ever came down to Alabama to hunt with me, he and Brian Call came down, and they had their bows set up like every Western guy has his bow set up. Big sight, big multi-pin sight with an adjustable multi-pin sight, drop away rest, the long stabilizers, the side angle bar thingies, whatever you call those. You know what I'm talking about? The ones that come sidebar, yeah.
Back bar, sidebar.
Whatever, yeah. Well, they had all that stuff. They've got them on 80-something pounds. They're shooting a 450 grain arrow at 80-something pounds. Aaron was shooting a heavier arrow, but Brian was shooting a lighter bow. And they're out there shooting these things, and they are loud as crap. I mean, it's what everybody shoots, And so I remember, we have these big fields on our farm, and so, there's 20 or 30 deer out there, and Aaron's sitting there ranging them, and I said, "Hey man, you're gonna have to cut all that out." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "You're gonna bust them." He said, "That far out?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, I don't know, 60, 70 yards.
Right.
And so a few minutes later, he does it again, and he turns around to say something to me. And when he turned around, I said, "You realize that we're completely busted, don't you?" And I could see the look on his face, and he turned around and he looked back out in the field, and every deer was staring up into the tree at us, from anywhere from 60 to 100 yards. And he's like, "Holy crap, this is ridiculous." I said, "I know, these deer are different, So then the next day we were hunting, and this buck comes out in this field, and it was 50, I think 54, 55 yards feeding. It was a nice buck. And Aaron says, I'm going to kill that deer. And I said, well, you're welcome to shoot at it. And he goes, what do you mean? He goes, I can hit that deer from here. I said, I'm sure you can. And he's just sitting there looking at me, and I started laughing. I said, no, go ahead. So I have this all on film. I turn the camera on. He draws his bow. Deer's got his head down feeding. He shoots. The deer blows, turns, and is in the tree line before his arrow even got there. And he looked up at me and he said, are you effing kidding me? I said, you're in the World Series now, buddy. This is not the same game you've been planning. And he's like, oh my God. And his whole game changed after that. I mean, his whole whitetail strategy changed. He realized you have got to get right on top of them, and you've basically got to aim off of them if they're past 25 yards.
Right.
You can't even hold your pin on the deer. You got to aim under them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's funny that, guys that are not exposed to these whitetails, they just don't understand, their ability to, do the matrix and get out of the way.
Right.
It's great.
Yeah, and their ability to not even get in the way in the first place. Like, God, they're elusive. It's crazy how they can be right there within proximity of you, and they typically are, just the way we cohabitate with them. If I had $1 for every time I was walking through the woods and deer were watching me and I didn't know it, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I'll tell guys, or I'd love to tell guys today, is that, off the subject of bows and arrows and gear, as far as a strategy for if you're wanting to kill a big deer, to me, the key to my success on our farms that we have the ability to hunt locally and hunt every day, the key to my success is restraint. It is not going to the property every time you have a day off. It's not going to hunt every time you have the chance to go hunt. If you've got a big deer you're trying to kill, it is having the restraint and the willpower not to go until the conditions are absolutely perfect, where there's no chance to bump that deer.
Yeah.
That's it. That is it in a nutshell. You cannot go sit in the same stand over and over and over and expect it to happen. It's got to be a total stealth mode, stealth mission. You're looking for that 100% every box is checked, that the factors are right, and you move in there and kill him. And that's the only way to do it. I mean, there's no other way. And it's tough for guys to do that because, it's not only your actions, it's the actions of the other people that hunt the property. So not only are you having to hunt this buck and work your strategy around what it's going to take to kill him, you've got to work your strategy around what your other guys that hunt the property are doing. So it's tough, man. It's a tough game. And I would say, what I do all year is I spend my time from the first week or two of the season. You can kill a big deer. You got to get lucky. You've got to have done your homework, and you got to know where he's going to be, and you've got to know where he's going to be kind of from history, not as much scouting and running cameras and all that, because you can push him out before it even starts. But you can kill a big buck early, and then from there until the rut, you basically, what I do is I just shoot does. I go to big food sources, fields, places where they're coming to browse, do what they do, and I shoot does all season until it's time to get back into buck mode. And I do not go anywhere near where these big bucks are living. If I've got one showing up on camera somewhere, I just don't even go there. I go hunt somewhere else. And But what I'm doing is I'm practicing for the big game. I'm tuning up. I'm making sure all my systems are working. I'm getting comfortable letting that arrow go, letting it go, getting that arrow running through animals. And that's it. The guys that are not shooting does, they're sitting up there going, I don't want to shoot a doe because I might not, I might mess up a chance at a buck. You've got to practice. You've got to shoot more animals. So when you do have that opportunity, you're going to be able to close the deal with, like what we talked about earlier, just this instinctive, natural, reflexive act. It's just, I don't know. It's automatic. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And you know what parallels real well, staying out of your, that spot and off that buck, is going somewhere else to hunt, man. Like nowadays
That's it.
with mobile tree stands and good gear, I mean, just that's one of the foundations about hunting that I feel like has been lost is just go explore, man. Just go get out there, go see something new, go see some new trees. A new sunset, a new sunrise in a different location. Like, I started doing that a couple of years ago, just pounding public land and other small parcels, even though I've grown up with the luxury of having a family farm, right? Uh,
Yep.
Not everyone has that. I'm lucky to have that, but I spend hardly any time there because, a testament to what you just said, I don't go till I feel like it's perfect. It's a small farm. The deer all around it are pressured. I will end that thing before it even starts. So, yeah, man, throw a stick and stands on your back and go see something new and go pound some public. And while you're doing that, you're like, it's like practice. Like you just said, for the big game. And now I've put my tree stand up and down 20 times. I can do it silently. And when the time comes, I'm not just sitting back on the couch, eating Cheetos and waiting, looking at an app that's going to tell me when the wind and the weather and everything's right. I'm out there and I've drawn my bow on some deer and shot some deer, and you're just right in the thick of it. I mean, I got to relearn it every year, it seems like, because I know some guys travel around to hunt and do things all year. That's not really my life. I work and then I have a little bit of time in the fall, and it takes me a couple weeks to kind of get back in that regiment. But just going to a new piece and pounding some new ground and seeing some new stuff, that really helps with that. And yeah, man, I get as many doe tags as I can typically every year.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the thing is if you've got a small piece of property you hunt and you've got a big deer on it, don't go anywhere near it. Do not go anywhere near it. Don't go hunt it. Just leave it alone and go hunt somewhere else. Go hunt public. Go do whatever. The way we do it is we have a large piece, but once a big deer has been identified in an area, I'll tell my partners, I'll say, hey, there's a big deer here. We're not going over there. And that's it. Everybody understands the program, and it's vice versa. Somebody will come in and go, man, I got a big deer over here. We're like, all right, not going anywhere near it. We'll hunt somewhere else. And when the conditions are right, you can go in there and kill him. And so that's the only way to do it. I mean, if you don't care about shooting big deer, if you just want to hunt and shoot deer, then none of this applies. And there's nothing wrong with that. I like shooting them. I mean, I'd shoot 40 does a year, if I could physically do it. I just like shooting them. I like seeing the arrow flight. I like being successful. Of course, I love eating them. And of course, we have so many people that we give meat to every year. They've almost become reliant on it. And then, it's just giving you that repetition. It's just like practicing with any sport, baseball, football, tennis, whatever, golf. It's repetition, repetition, repetition. You can't expect to close the deal on these big deer if it's the first shot you've taken in 2 years.
Right.
It's just not. It's your odds are so low. So I just wish people would just don't worry about the trophy as much and just shoot more deer and get experience under their belt.
Right.
And keep limit their range and stay within their abilities. That's what I do. I mean, I've been shooting a bow for oh gosh, I turned 46 yesterday, so I started when I was 12 shooting a bow. I killed my first one when I was 12 or 13. So, and what is that? 34 years?
Could be.
I've been doing this 34 years. I still shoot as many does as I can every year. I mean, I just practice.
Right.
So anyway.
I know I want to get you going here soon. You got a busy day. I got some stuff to do as well. I want to bring this kind of full circle and just touch on a few things on arrows. So, if somebody was just come across your site online, or they're hearing this conversation for the first time today, and they're they want to go the right route and build some proper arrows. Maybe they've had some in the past that work. They want to be better, or they've just really looking to dial stuff in. I guess, how do guys go about I fielded this question multiple times. Hey, I'm not sure if I'm a 400 or a 350, and I don't want to order the wrong thing. I believe you do have something maybe where guys can order an arrow or two of each
We do.
spine.
Yep, we have a 2-arrow test kit. It is for bear shafts only. And I know that is inconvenient for some that don't fletch their own arrows. But our experience has been the guys that are willing to go through the process of ordering 2 arrows to test are a little more well-versed in what they need.
Sure.
If they're going to go through that process and just not rely on a recommendation, they usually have the ability to fletch their own arrows. But we don't do the test kits fletched, because if you're truly going to test, you don't want to start with a fletched arrow. You want to start with a bear shaft.
Right.
So yeah, we offer the test kits where you can get 2 of the same spine, or you can get a combination of 2, like a 350 and a 300, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And always start long. Always start a little bit longer than what you think, because you can always pull the nock and trim the arrow. And don't get too crazy about the squaring and the getting everything cut just right. Don't worry about all that. All you're trying to do is establish spine. That's all you're trying to do, is establish what the proper spine is. So, man, I mean, if you've got to cut one of these things with a Dremel tool, with a cutoff blade, it's okay. Just figure out what the bow wants to eat. Once you figure that out, then you can build perfect arrows. But, you're just trying to figure out what that spine is, because, again, that is the single most important factor for accurate shooting and good arrow flight, is having the proper spine. It's not how straight it is. It's not how many fletchings you have or what your FOC is. It's the proper spine. So that's what we offer, and it makes it real easy. And I mean, I've already tuned a couple of 100 bows over the phone with guys. I don't mind doing it. Go out there and shoot them, and then call me and tell me what they're doing. And as long as there's nothing major wrong with your bow, I can kind of help you. I'm happy to help. Guide you where you need to be, tell you which way to go, what to cut, what to add. It's not that hard.
Yeah, and for guys that want to avoid the phone call and think they have a good enough grasp on it, so you can order the test kit. You have to, I'm assuming you have to put your component end together, right?
Yeah, you just glue your outsert on, yeah.
And then you can do your testing with a bare shaft, right? Without fletchings at what, close yardage? Just kind of walk me through that process.
Yeah. Well, you can either paper tune. If you don't have the ability to do that, that's fine. Just get it where it's shooting close, and you can shoot it at 20 yards and even out to 30 yards with a bare shaft. And a lot of the flight you can see what it's doing, and then of course the impact is going to tell you a lot.
Right.
So if you've got if you've got it impacting a certain direction, it's going to tell you which way it's planing, which tells you which way the knock is, which tells you whether it's weak or stiff. Not too terribly hard, Paper is the easiest way to do it for most, because it's a quick down and dirty way to get it close.
Right.
Once you get it close, then you can order arrows, build your arrows up, and you can fine tune. You can adjust point weight up or down 25 grains, whatever. I have got so many guys that call me and say, man, I just ordered a dozen 125 grain broadheads from this company. So that's what I'm going to shoot. And I'm going, man, and now I want to order arrows. And I want to go, golly, man, you really should have ordered your arrows, played with field tips, because you may get a setup with a 100 grain field tip that shoots bullet holes, no fletching, and the arrow may be 2 inches longer than what you thought you needed. Well, that extra 2 inches is the equivalent of another 25 grains of a point. You know what I'm saying?
Yep, I do.
And yeah, and you can shoot a 100 grain head. So, you want to play with the cheaper, field tips are cheap. They're affordable. You want to adjust weights and do all that with those, and then, purchase your broadheads, once you get your weight established.
I'll add to that, there's a few sites that I use. I'm sure there's lots of them for traditional stuff. Big Jim's Archery Shop, and then Three Rivers, and they offer field point weight test kits, which come with from 100 to 250, 2 of each, and that is a no-brainer that everybody should have that in their toolbox. There's no faster way to tune than to have 2 of those point weights from every. And yeah, 25 grains can be the difference between it working and not working.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a no-brainer, So that's that process. For the trad guys, if you're a shorter draw, you can cut a few inches off. If a longer draw, glue that outsert on full length, 32 inches. Put what your optimum, what your desired point weight would be. Let's say it's a 175. Put that on there, and start shooting that bear shaft at full length, and then just pull the knock, because you know that you're going to be weak at full length, or the odds are very high. Well, if you go ahead and cut 3 inches off of it to a 29-inch arrow because you're drawing, say, 27.5, and you shoot, and you're a little stiff, well, now you've eliminated one of your 2 abilities to adjust the spine: arrow length and point weight. So now all you can do is add weight. But if you start long, you can slowly trim it until you get it to where it's flying great. Just pull the knock, trim from the end, shoot again, same old, just keep repeating until you get it to fly good. Now you've got 2 methods to adjust spine versus just limiting yourself with one when you automatically cut it to length. So that's one thing I would tell the trad guys. Don't get too caught up in knock high, knock low. Worry more about your left and right when you're adjusting spine. Don't try to do 2 things at once. If you're getting a little high tear, don't get too caught up on that, because that's normally easily adjustable with either sliding your knock up and down, or you can do a slight adjustment to your brace height, and that'll help change that, by, putting more twist or less twist in your string.
Right. I wanted to just mention, too, about the paper tuning. There's a lot of videos on YouTube how to build a real cheap, real fast paper tuning setup in butcher paper. Where I don't know in your experience or what you have set up at your house, but there's some ways you can do it with PVC framing or just 2x4s, a staple gun, whatever you got. All you basically need is a piece of paper that's tight that you can shoot an arrow through.
Absolutely, and there's 10 different videos on YouTube on how to do that. It's super simple.
Yeah, I built one out of an old fire ring, actually, and it worked great. And without that thing, you're kind of just maybe, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can take a piece of plywood, and then just cut a square out in the middle of it to leave yourself like a picture frame.
Yeah, right on.
And you can just, you can just staple the paper to that.
Right,
So it's not hard at all.
right.
But that's not the only way to do it. I mean, but that's just one of the ways,
Right. Yeah, and this stuff's all fun to do too. That's the cool thing is once you start doing it and you start like moving in the right direction and realizing, wow, I'm getting somewhere with this. It elevates your confidence, and it's like it's a hobby all on its own. I mean, obviously you're working towards, going out and killing animals and being a hunter, but it's almost its own thing at the same time. I mean, it parallels what your end goal is, but it's not work. I mean, it is, but man, it is fun as hell to do this stuff, and especially when you start kind of like putting the pieces of the puzzle together and like, oh, now I understand this thing that I didn't understand for so long. It is pretty addictive.
Well, and there's a lot of satisfaction and sense of accomplishment when you've invested the time to understand your equipment and fine tune it, and do it yourself, and then come back and have success on something you made that investment of time in. There's just a lot of reward there,
Right.
So I really enjoy doing it. For some people, it's just second nature. I mean, some guys can set a bow up in just a split second. I mean, there's not a big effort, and they, take for granted that there's so many guys out there that just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what good small companies are for, like ours. I mean, that's what we're here for, is to help guys. This isn't a money thing. I mean, we certainly have to be profitable to keep the lights on, but this is a quality of life thing for me. This is what I've always wanted to do full time. I've always helped my friends and the people that I'm around, and people I've hunted with. I've always helped them, get their systems set up to where they're the most efficient they can be. And man, doing it on this larger scale and helping others is great,
Yeah, it's pretty awesome, and I made this statement to you last week. Is it's kind of how people want to shop now. They want to know who they're dealing with, and they want that assistance and help because it's becoming harder and harder to find. I mean, you can go on Amazon and order a dozen arrows, but then you're done. You're on your own. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's just cool to know the backstory and know the people involved and know that you're going to be taken care of on the backside of the deal when you need support or have issues or whatever. It's just a good time and place for you to be doing what you're doing,
Yeah.
and a testament to the fact that you're sitting there putting arrows together and getting them shipped out right now. I mean, people are receiving it.
Yeah, well, one of the other things I want to tell folks is that we are humans. The people that make these products for us, all the different components that go together to build this arrow, they're humans. And there's a human factor involved in just about everything. So, we're shipping, thousands of arrows out the door, okay? Thousands of individual arrows. So let's say that we ship out 20,000 arrows, okay? If we ship out 20,000 arrows, there is going to be a small percentage of those arrows that are going to go out that something may not be right. The fletching may not have adhered properly. It maybe not enough adhesive got on the vein. Maybe it got bumped, with somebody's finger when they weren't looking, and it had some oil off the finger and the vein didn't stick. Or, maybe one of the 20,000 knocks, maybe one of them, when it was getting molded, got turned, or it's got a flaw in it. Maybe one of these arrow shafts is not perfectly straight. It's a small percentage, but it happens. And so what I want guys to know about us is all you've got to do is email me, call me, or text me, and I will make it right immediately. There's no discussion. There's no debate. There's no inquiry whether it's your fault or what have you done wrong. If you're not happy with it, or if there's something that needs to be, replaced or done, we're going to do it immediately, because it's such a small percentage. We know it's going to happen, and it's not worth, getting into some huge debate over about who's right and who's wrong. So I just want guys to know that. I've had, guys that we sent arrows to, and they just, for some reason, never felt like they needed to call and say, hey, 2 of these arrows, I've got epoxy down in the outsert, from when you guys installed them. Well, again, it's a human factor, right? Well, they don't call, but they'll get online and talk about it. Or they'll say, hey, one of these arrows, it's got a slight wobble to it on the knock end. Well, they'll talk about it online, but they don't call me. So I just want guys to know, if you're dealing with us, you're dealing with me. I am the customer service guy. I'm all parts. I wear all hats. So if you've got an issue, you're going to talk to me. I'm going to make it right, and we're going to get it fixed. It's such a small percentage that it's not worth us even debating. We're just going to replace it. So, for every 1,000 arrows that goes out the door, there may be 10 of them that have an issue. Well, that's not a bad percentage,
Right.
They're arrows. There's going to be something every now and then that there's an issue with. So I just want people to feel like they can comfortably call me and not feel like they're bothering or being a pest or whatever. I mean, we want everybody happy.
Yeah, that's a testament to what I was saying. I mean, you gotta want to do business with people that are going to be there for you when you got problems, because problems will happen.
That's right. And for the guys that are super analytical and they're, measuring every arrow and testing every arrow and everything's perfect and they want everything absolutely dead perfect, and they've got one that in their mind is just not to spec, it's say 4 grains off or whatever, or if they feel like it's not 1,000 straightness, if you want to replace it, we replace it. No questions asked. But I'll tell you that all these arrows that we get back from guys that they feel are just not up to snuff, we have a little box that's got the different sizes, and then we bring them back and put them in there, and those are the arrows that Aaron and I shoot and hunt with. Aaron and I have killed all of our deer, and Frank, all of our arrows that we've shot through animals this year have been with arrows that people have returned.
Right on.
Yeah, and I wanted to do that to prove a point, So anyway, I thought that was pretty funny.
Everything that we talked about and covered here today can be done with field points before you even get to the stages of putting a broadhead on and figuring out what your broadhead setup you're going to be hunting with come this fall. Can we maybe, like, in a couple months from now do a podcast and just talk on broadheads for hunting whitetails and other big game and stuff like that? Would that be cool?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got Aaron and I have been working on a broadhead this season, and we're it's in production now, and it'll be available. We're hoping the first week of May. I'm pretty sure it will be. I don't see any reason it won't be. But yeah, we've been, if you follow Aaron, you notice that he always has multiple broadheads in his quiver. Well, he does that because he's constantly testing. He's wanting to gather data. And this year, we have taken that to a whole nother level. And then we've been testing this broadhead that we've designed. I was never even going to discuss this head. We were just going to release it in May and then start talking about it. But Aaron is the worst human on the planet for keeping a secret. Because Aaron is so honest. When people ask him, he tells them the truth. He doesn't have that DNA to say anything other than the black and white truth. So he talks about these heads that we're developing and we've been testing, and he's like, oh, but I'm not supposed to talk about that. Well, it's too late now. So I've got tons and tons of guys asking me about them, and I'm just going to say they're a 2-blade head with a bleeder. They're the blend of our 3 favorite heads over the last 20 years. And they're built to really high tolerances, and we're going to release them in May. And in May, I'll hop on here with you, and I'll talk to you about them and talk to you about the different attributes of why we think it's the head that is what we wanted and how we got to that point. And we'll discuss it with everybody then.
Yeah, that'll work out perfect because obviously broadheads are a huge thing, but I knew if we got into that conversation today, we won't be getting off this thing till lunchtime. So.
Well, it's a lot I don't want to talk about either, so it works out good.
Right.
Yep. Sounds good.
Well, that's awesome, man. Shout out your website. I'll put all your contact information in the show notes on this podcast, but the website so people can go there, take a look at the gear, and then take a look at that spine index chart that we were talking about as well, right?
Yeah. It's just day 6 gear, and it's all pretty self-explanatory on there. And now you can call Ben back and see what's on fire in his world.
Right. Okay. That's what I'm going to do. Probably going to shoot my bow today, too. How about that?
Yeah. There you go.
Well, thank you, Brian. I appreciate your time as always, and we'll talk soon.
All right, buddy. See you.